Thank you very, very much. I'm David Ruffin, Chair of the North Carolina Historical Commission. Welcome to the June 22nd, 2022 quarterly meeting of our commission. Welcome to the general public who are attending remotely through the Zoom conference call, certainly to the staff and to fellow commissioners. I hope everyone's doing well on this first full day of the summer. Again, two things that are required, of course, are that the agenda having been published and shared with all commissioners to ask if there are any conflicts of interest known to any commissioners on any item that we will be discussing. And by the way, it will be a very routine and relatively short meeting today. Actually, three things that I need to do. First of all, call the roll to determine we have an official quorum. So Dr. Bryan.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here.
Ms. Condell.
Here.
Dr. Dncr.
Here.
Mr. Dixon.
Here.
Ms. Groom. Absent at this point, Dr. Johnson.
Present.
Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Reynolds.
Present.
Ms. Snowden.
Here.
And David Ruffin. Relative to the roll call, again, being part of the protocols for remote meetings of this nature, there will be a necessity to have fully chronicled and documented roll calls for all motions and votes that we take as the commission. So that forgive the tedium of that, but it is part of the requirement for a remote meeting of this nature. First on the agenda would be the approval of the March 23rd minutes, again shared with commissioners several days ago. So hopefully you've had a chance to read those, and I'm opening up for any comments or motions either for adoption or modifications of those March 23rd minutes.
I move approval.
Commissioner Bryan.
Second that.
Moved by Commissioner Bryan and seconded by Commissioner Dncr. All in favor. Any other comments?
I wasn't fast enough, but I just need to make a slight correction on in the concluding remarks.
Go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
And it was that Angela, it had to, let me say it correctly. That it has to do with the premiere of the opera at the North Carolina Opera, and that it should read Curator Earl James with Angela Thorpe, Director of the African American Heritage Commission, led panel discussions about the Underground Railroad.
Instead of led to, but led panel discussion.
Yeah, he didn't lead two. He was part of two panel discussions, but he wasn't leading them. So
Okay.
The other thing I can, if you don't mind, it looks like there might be a typo in his name. Earl,
No.
It has an I.
yes,
No?
that's how
No.
it's spelled. That's
Oh, okay. Thank you.
yes, I would just say
Yeah.
Earl Imes and Angela Thorpe conducted panel discussions about the Underground Railroad.
So no,
Commissioner,
And actually it was one panel discussion there, and then Earl did another panel discussion at the actual event.
Commissioners Bryan and Dncr, are you satisfied with that?
Yes.
With your motions subject to that change by
I am.
Dr. Johnson?
Yes, I'll accept that.
I will as well.
All right, well, let's move to the adoption of the March 23rd minutes. with the subject to the correction suggested by Dr. Johnson. Dr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mayor
Approve.
Clark,
Yes.
Ms. Condell,
Yes.
Dr. Dennard,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds,
Yes.
Ms. Snowden,
Yes.
David Ruffin, yes. Okay, we'll move at this point to Accessions and Dia Sessions from two areas, which are the museums and the historic sites. Again, these have been provided and published on the agenda several days ago, so hopefully you've had a chance to read through those. I know most of these are from the museums, but Ken Howard, our director of the History Museum, is not available today to make any presentation of these, but I'm not certain that we really need staff interpretation unless there happens to be a question. And then Dr. Waters, we may direct that to you if someone does have particular questions about the proposed sessions and Dia sessions. So as we first look to the proposed sessions, again, these are from the NC Museum of History, the NC Museum of the Albemarle, and the NC Maritime Museums. And we'll get to the NC State Historic Sites in a moment. So that takes us through page 34 of the document that was published and shared with the Commission. Any questions or comments or thoughts relative to those proposed sessions? And for the general public, these are is a process that the staff goes through very significant amount of detail and analysis around the appropriateness and of these items to be presented in various aspects of the broader Department of Natural and Cultural Resources relative to the resources the state has in preservation and things of the nature. So that's basically what we, and then we'll get to in a moment the Dia sessions, and usually that's accompanied by, it always is accompanied by reasons for Dia sessions. But can we focus on the first 34 pages of the proposed sessions, which are to the three museums?
Mr. Ruffin, I make a motion that we accept the sessions as presented to us.
Commissioner Snowden has moved acceptance of the proposed sessions to the three museums. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Commissioner Johnson, thank you for the second. Any discussions? Discussion. Hearing none for the proposed sessions of the North Carolina Museum of History, the North Carolina Museum of the Albemarle, and the North Carolina Maritime Museums. All in favor, say aye. Dr. Bryan.
Yes, aye.
Mayor Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condell.
Aye.
Dr. Dennard.
Aye.
Mr. Dixon.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
Ms. Snowden.
Aye.
And David Ruffin, aye, yes. I presume Ms. Groom has not been able to join. I don't believe I see her on the Zoom call at this point. So those having been adopted, let's move to the 5 pages listed on the North Carolina State Historic Sites proposed sessions. Any motion on to accept the sessions to the North Carolina State Historic Sites?
I move acceptance, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Dennard has moved to accept. Do I hear a second?
This is Susan Phillips. I second.
Commissioner Phillips has seconded. Dr. Dennard has proposed acceptance. Commissioner Phillips has seconded for accepting the proposed accessions to the North Carolina State Historic Sites. All in favor, say aye. Dr. Bryan,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Condell,
Aye.
Dr. Dennard,
Aye.
Mr. Dixon,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden,
Aye.
and David Ruffin, aye. So all proposed accessions have been adopted by accepted by the Historical Commission. So we now move to the proposed Dia Sessions. We have from two quarters, the North Carolina Maritime Museums and the North Carolina State Historic Sites. I believe we have the ability to vote on those jointly, but since we did divide the sessions up, I'll go ahead and divide these up as well. So North Carolina Maritime Museums, these again for the public's awareness, this usually occurs because of either duplicates or condition of the items being beyond repair or preservation. And I don't believe there was anything there that was controversial or needed a significant amount of explanation, but certainly open it up for any questions or discussions. Again, on the North Carolina Maritime Museums. Dia Sessions.
I move approval.
Dr. Bryan has moved approval of the proposed Dia Sessions. Mayor Clark has, Mayor Clark, do you have a question or a second? Second, thank you, sir. Mayor Clark has moved to second. Any discussion? All in favor then indicate by saying aye. Dr. Bryan,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Condell,
Aye.
Dr. Dennard,
Aye.
Mr. Dixon,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden,
Aye.
and David Ruffin, aye. Okay, and to conclude this segment of the agenda, let's look at the proposed Dia Sessions from the North Carolina State Historic Sites.
This is Susan Phillips. I move that those Dia Sessions be approved.
Commissioner Phillips has moved approval. Do I hear a
This is
second?
Barbara Snowden. I'd like to second.
Commissioner Snowden has seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye to approve the proposed Dia Session to the North Carolina State Historic Sites. Dr. Bryan,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Condell,
Aye.
Dr. Dennard,
Aye.
Mr. Dixon,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Snowden,
Aye.
David Ruffin, aye. Okay, we now move to what I feel is one of my favorite agenda items, because I feel like it does not only give the commission, but the general public a sense of all the tremendous work that the staff does just on a daily basis. And I think, again, our goal here is not each director, I think, and representative of the various units that will be presenting reports have prepared written reports. But I think our goal here today is just to get a synopsis, Dr. Waters, from these experts in these various fields, and we look forward to that as always. So I'm going to ask Dr. Darren Waters, who's of course Deputy Secretary of the Department, and as secretary to our commission, if he would determine the order in which he would like these reports to be given to the commission.
Well, thank you, Chair Ruffin, and thank you to each one of the division directors and the team, as I like to say, for the reports that they provided each of you all. And so what I'm going to do is just recognize you for 3 to 5 minutes to give your highlights of your reports. And I'm going to turn to Ramona first, if she does not mind.
Not at all, Dr. Waters. Thank you very much. And that's what having a name at the top of the alphabet will get you as well. So thank you very much. And Mr. Chair and commission members, it's always a pleasure to see you. Appreciate your time and engagement this afternoon. Very quickly, you have my written report, but I do want to thank our staff who are working under tremendous constituent demands these days. There's lots of interest in public history. There's lots of interest in North Carolina historic places, and the Division of Historical Resources, as you know, is one of our primary constituent service units. The unfortunate the unfortunate news is that our vacancies are persisting. We are continuing to try to fill those, and I went and counted the number of staff we have out as a vacancy versus how many are just in the Historic Preservation Office. And we are sadly meeting the ratio, the percentage I have heard reported from Secretary Wilson. State government is currently running about a 20% vacancy rate, when normally I think it would be somewhere around 10. So we are contributing to that number right now, but we are working really hard with our human resources staff to get those positions filled. We are particularly stretched in the Survey and National Register branch, which is sort of the foundational work that you need to, in terms of what places should get some protection, what places should get some consideration. So to that end, the statewide compensation plan was something that was recently unveiled. I know several of us have given some feedback through channels regarding that, and perhaps Dr. Waters will speak a little bit more to that. But we are finding that was not in keeping with what we are observing in the market for some of the private competitors in the public history space. I also just want to report we had a very successful resiliency training for our local governments. We had nearly 100 people participate, so that was a great success. We did that in partnership with the National Park Service and the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. From the National Register staff, I'm also glad to report we have multiple new nominations. Dr. Waters, that's one of the pieces of his portfolio that I think is a pleasurable one, is to sign National Register nominations and forward those to the Park Service. And a couple of those that I think will be of interest. We had a piece of railroad rolling stock. That might not be something that you think about as being eligible for the National Register, but it is. And that's a very special piece of state-owned rolling stock. It's the Southern Railway passenger car number 1211. It is one of the last and only known segregated railway cars, passenger cars, left in the United States. I think the one that is probably better known is in the Smithsonian Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. So we have another, which is really important. We also received a Park Service grant for some of its rehabilitation. So we were really excited about that. And I believe you signed this week, Dr. Waters, you signed the nomination for the Eunice Wayman Birthplace. If you're up on North Carolina history, you'll know that Eunice Wayman is probably more well known as Nina Simone, so one of our North Carolina natives. So her birthplace in Tryon is wending its way up to the National Park Service for their consideration. We also participated in the Keeping History Above Water National Conference, which was held in Norfolk, Virginia in May, and we gave a presentation about the wave attenuator technology that has been employed at Brunswick Town Fort Anderson. If anybody would like to learn more about that, I'm glad to follow up. I can see the presentation, but it's a real win-win for natural resources as well as cultural resources designed to protect the very fragile wharf system from the colonial era there. So the last thing I'll just mention, because we mentioned it before at the last meeting, but as a follow-up, public interest in our cemetery program continues really unabated. We continue to find and hear from constituents who really value and appreciate our help. And I'm pleased that we had several, we're still in the process of finalizing the grant award, but we had multiple submissions for grant funding from our certified local grant program about cemetery protection and survey. So more to come on that for our next meeting, but I'll yield the time back, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the time.
I would like, before we go to the next report, I would like to comment on Ramona's remark about the staffing shortages, particularly in light of what I sense out there is a groundswell, as she indicated, of interest in history. I think this is just my sense, totally anecdotal, is that a lot of people are seeking this as a respite away from some of the red hot political issues that just have dominated us and worn us completely down for so long. And I do sense a genuine interest in history. The sad thing is that you're being inundated with a lot of interest and at an incredible time of staff shortages. My world is, as you know, banking, and I can assure you that a lot of the larger, more organized institutions, even in private, are struggling with staff retention and salary grades that are more traditionally established during more non-inflationary times are just not cutting it. And unfortunately, that's disproportionate to particularly some of the younger people in the market looking for more advancement and more opportunity. It is, I think, one of the greater insidious aspects of the inflation that we're dealing with right now. And I say that not as I don't have a solution. I'm just confirming exactly what Ramona Bartos just said, is that it is a clear issue out there in the entire marketplace.
Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I echo those words. And as Ramona alluded to, there are major concerns here among the Office of Archives and History, specifically about salaries as well and compensation. And so that's another big issue that's right, that we're trying to work through that in conversations with our HR office here, with the secretary, and with the state legislature. So we'd ask, if you can, to be thinking about those things too, because the work that the team does here is highly consequential, as we know.
Right.
And so if we can communicate that to the public, I'm looking for every opportunity to do that. So Ramona, thank you so much for that brief report. Michelle, I'm going to turn to you.
Do you mind, Dr.
Mr.
Waters?
Condell.
Yes. Thank you. I just had a couple of quick things. Ramona, in your comment, I just got out of a meeting where we were talking with other museum directors about this exact thing, that compensation report. And I'm desperately looking for my little Post-it where I wrote down, it's AAMD, which American Alliance Museum Directors, just conducted a study recently that was, you might find useful. So just thought I would throw that out there. I had one other question as well. I saw you had NAGPRA as one of the items on your report from the Office of State Archaeology. And it says that you're now engaging in consultations. I was just curious what you mean by that, by now engaging.
Thank you, Ms. Condell, for both of those comments. Mr. Howard is not here for the museums, but I believe he has shared that information from the museum discipline with our folks. So thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention as well. As far as NAGPRA goes, we did a re-inventory of boxes throughout the collection and found human remains, skeletal remains in amongst those. So that is part of the NAGPRA. One of the cases also is from a recent infrastructure project. So that's more of a recent origin. But we are working with the tribal historic preservation officers that would be affiliated with those particular parts of the state, and are also working with the Eastern Band, as well as the Cherokee represented out of Oklahoma. And there's some others that I don't want to misstate, but I think the Muskogee and the Creek also were interested. The Catawba, I cannot recall, but they were all contacted, is my recollection. And Dr. Waters is also engaged in that process. And we're very glad to be working through that.
Excellent. Thank you for the context. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Bart.
Yes, sir.
Dncr, may I make an observation?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And I think we talked about this a little at our meeting in the National Register of Historic Places. But we handle these historic districts. I'm a little concerned about the input that that included there, and maybe we can review our policies to see if we need to broaden our historic engagement, make sure that other stakeholders are considered in these historic districts, because I'm getting the impression that that it doesn't reflect the broader community, but you may have business folk getting together and some historically minded folk getting together to carve out the historic districts. And there are other segments of the community that may not know that much about what's happening. And I'm just asking if we can review our policies there to see if we need to make some changes with regard to engagement, to see if a significant segment of the population is contacted and is familiar with what's going on with regard to these historic districts.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you, Dr. Dennard. We would be glad to revisit that as well. And that's makes to me, helps me with the point, if you don't mind me saying so, that it's a very constituent oriented business that we are in, that it's very people oriented. And we only have 3 National Register specialists for the entire state currently employed. It's challenging to do as much as we want to do. So I'm looking forward to having a full staff, and possibly with Dr. Waters' support, we could add some more folks to help with exactly that need. So I appreciate that comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Bartos? Ramona, thank you again for that report, and thank you for those questions. Michelle, if you're ready, I'll turn to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Waters, Chairman Ruffin, commissioners, colleagues. It's good to see you and anyone who's visiting with us from the general public. Hope you all are having a good afternoon. I do want to thank Ramona for her report. 2 of the items that she mentioned are definitely points of pride in terms of a collaborative effort between the Division of Historic Sites and Ramona's team, specifically the segregated Jim Crow era car at the Transportation Museum. So I just want to make sure and commend the North Carolina Transportation Museum for their work on that, as well as the wave attenuators at Brunswick Town Fort Anderson, particularly thinking about Jim McKee, who's site manager there. And I think it's important to just also acknowledge the hard work of Kimberly Candros. I know that's a name that you all hear often. She is someone who's a force to be reckoned with in the direction of fundraising and identifying grant opportunities for many of these projects. And on both of these efforts, Kimberly Candros was really critical. So very grateful for Ramona's team for their support. Wanted to highlight some really phenomenal news for us. We are within 8% of our pre-pandemic visitation numbers division-wide. But the extraordinary news is that some of our sites are already exceeding their pre-pandemic visitation numbers. And those sites are Alamance Battleground, Bentonville Battlefield, Historic Edenton and House and Horseshoe, as well as James K. Polk Historic Site and Advanced Birthplace. We believe the reason for this increase includes some new interpretation that's inclusive, more and more inclusive, active outreach efforts, diverse events, and some access to trails and greenways. All of that is driving some increase in numbers there. We are really emphasizing wellness and safety efforts. There's some things that we are fixing that hadn't been established because of austerity measures in the past, including making sure that every single site has AED defibrillators installed, making sure that every single site has staff and volunteers who are CPR trained and AED trained. We really feel like that's critical for the well-being of our staff, but also the well-being of our visitors. This is not in the report, but we are very close to being able to present to the department and to all of you our strategic plan. We've been working with a facilitator named Catherine Northington to get a comprehensive strategic plan in place for the division. And when we say comprehensive, we have a very strong team that touches every part of our organizational chart. We also have had informational interviews with stakeholders from within the department, but also from our boards, commissions, and friends groups, as well as other community stakeholders, and lots of time in collective work, thinking about what our key outcomes are going to be. And so really excited to be able to share that with you very soon. And of course, that strategic plan will align with the department's strategic goals as well. You will note that we continue to be about the work of true inclusion. For us, true inclusion means that we're telling, all stories for all people, but we are also building relationships where perhaps we hadn't had them before. For us, this is not just about racial diversity. This is about gender. This is about geography. This is about generation. This is about accessibility. But really, it comes down to building relationships. And we're really proud to be working with an Indigenous-led firm for this growing work called Hvcu Emergent Equity. And we have increasingly realized that we will be in the weeds with them on several projects. And one example of that is our Golden and Ruth Franks Freedom House project in Edenton. Hvcu Emergent Equity worked with us to have what we call a values setting circle, where we as a team clarify the values that we are, what is our posture in terms of the philosophy of the work that we are wanting to hold ourselves accountable to as we engage communities. Many living community members remember spending time in the Golden and Ruth Franks Freedom House, along with the likes of Martin Luther King Jr. and Diane Nash. So we're very excited about that work, and the NEH grant that supports it, as well as the National Park Service grant that supports that work. Both of those are continuing quite well. We've just had some several national news segments, but one being about the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum at Historic Palmer Memorial Institute. The dormitories there were named by the National Trust for Historic Preservation on their list of 11 most endangered historic sites. We are leveraging this as a rallying cry for a season of revitalization for the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum. And we are indeed in good company. You will, I think, note that Jamestown is listed as one of the 11 sites. And so we're pleased. We're not pleased at the conditions of the dorms, which are really catastrophic, but we're very pleased to have this kind of national attention and to be able to leverage it. And extremely exuberant that you will note that there's $16 million in the governor's budget to get that work moving. We are also excited by some of the programs that are increasingly getting more and more robust as people emerge from the realities of the pandemic. Events at places like Bentonville have drawn quite a bit of attention, and every single program we are looking to emphasize true inclusion. So I will stop there, but happy to answer any further questions you have regarding this report or anything else regarding historic sites.
Okay. Michelle, Ms. Lanier, thank you very much for your report. A couple observations. One deals with the, can you hear me? One dealing with the listening sessions that you have started with regard to Golden and Ruth Frank House in Edenton. And from my reading of your report, it appears that you are placing a great deal of emphasis on the input that comes from that community. And I just wanted to know if you have plans to broaden that, because there may have been a considerable amount of tension between Golden Franks, Ruth Franks, what they were, and the community folk there, as opposed to what he was doing in other areas, maybe like Swan Quarter, you know, when he led a protracted protest down there. And some of these civil rights icons, they have become more noted and respected figures now in their hometowns, but that was not the case when they were at the, you know, the peak of their activism. These folk didn't really care that much about them. So I'm just wondering if you limit, you know, your listening sessions for input to the folk in Edenton, would you get a representative slice of what Golden Franks was about, as opposed to targeting some of these other strategic communities where he was active as a civil rights leader? That's one piece. And then you have on page 3 where you say staff members represented the division at many conferences and symposia this spring. And I was a little curious that there was no mention of this excellent underground symposium that we held in New Bern there, May 21st. Is that something that should have been maybe listed?
Thank you, Dr. Dncr.
So that
Would you like me to respond, or is there another question?
No, that's all I have for you.
Yes.
You can respond.
Thank you, Dr. Dncr, for your questions. I too am very excited that there was an underground railroad symposium in New Bern at Tryon Palace, and have reached out to my colleague Bill McRae to say that in the future we would be delighted to have our staff invited and included in any possible way, particularly because we do have several sites that are part of Underground Railroad history, from Somerset Place, historic Halifax, historic Edenton, and we're hoping down the road to include Reed Gold Mine and historic Stagville as a part of the Network Freedom initiative under the Underground Railroad program under National Park Service. And so I have, I think we're getting a little feedback there. But so Dr. Dncr, that is definitely a desire going forward, and we welcome inclusion and would love to be at that table more. I will circle back to your Franks question. So we have been pleasantly surprised and delighted by the ways in which people are speaking in affirmative tones about the work and about their memories of Golden and Ruth Franks. There are many African-American residents of Edenton who have returned after some time away, which seems to be the trend. I call it the great migration that's happening. And there are particularly elder women who remember being taught by by Ruth Franks, who also remember being a part of the very first action that Golden Franks took to desegregate the local movie theater, which, if you recall, was an act of all girl students. And so several of those folks were there. This is a phased project, and so I will definitely take it into deep consideration, your advisement that it would be important to look at other communities in Eastern North Carolina as we, and I saw your note in the chat, Ramona, thank you. But yes, because we are working on a planning grant with the National Endowment of the Humanities, we are doing a phase 1. And so phase 1 was to definitely contend with the local reconciliation group that's in Edenton, that's deeply interested in the history of civil rights, but also the relevance to current issues. And I imagine that in second and third phase, as we continue to think about the stories of Golden and Ruth Franks, we will continue to broaden out and connect to the work that's happening with the African American Heritage Commission and with the SHPO's office around the northeastern sector of North Carolina. So thank you so much for those comments.
Ms. Lanier, I'd like to just interject one thing, and I think that given this is, and for the broader public, I think this is important to recognize Commissioner Dixon relative to all the many efforts he has done over the Golden Franks initiatives, and certainly since I've been on the commission. And I just wondered if he might share a comment or two on how that process is going in the Edenton community.
Yeah, it's going great. And I was thinking that Michelle really needs to live in Edenton and commute occasionally to Raleigh. we're gonna make her a bona fide native, and all that she has done to push this, this project forward, and the Hayes project has, I was thinking about that, and her sort of subtle kindness, her and her graciousness has really worked so well, especially with the Hayes project. I mean, we had a lot of problems that we were trying to iron out. She came to town, and in about a 45-minute period, we had worked it all out. So Michelle, there's no way that I can thank you enough for doing all of that. The other thing that's been really fun for me, I'm on the board of the National Trust, so I was really proud we just had our board meeting last week to be able to, talk a little bit about the Charlotte Hawkins Brown listing in the 11 most endangered, and how important that site is. And then finally, I had known Golden and Mrs. Franks my entire life, and really was fairly close to them. And so I just think having this house restored it's just one of the most wonderful things that really has ever happened to Edenton. And it's calling attention to a person that deserved to be honored, who had not been honored until this time. But Michelle, I can't tell you how much I appreciate all you have done for us.
Thank you. It's my honor. We have 3 total listening sessions. We've done 2. The 3rd will be on my birthday on July 20th. So I'll be there spending my birthday in Edenton. And I can't think of a better place when we think about Harriet Ann Jacobs, Golden and Ruth Franks, the people who labored, the enslaved laborers of Hayes Place. It's really been an honor. It's deep, rich history. So, but happy to also consider broadening out the aperture as Dr. Dncr has recommended. So thank you.
And I appreciate Dr. Dennard's comment about the inevitable controversial aspect of Golden Franks. I was a teenager in a Hosky remembering the African Americans being heartbroken that Martin Luther King could not come over from Edenton to a Hosky and visit the minority Baptist church there, which I think Ramona has just recently been put into the historic registry, if I'm not mistaken. But my point there is that's part of the greatness of history, the perspective it gives us, right? Even the controversial, but let's be honest, most people that are controversial are the real trailblazers. And that's exactly what I think distinguishes or differentiates history from the, again, red hot politics of the given day. But that was a well thought through comment, I think, Dr. Dennard, about that. So, Dr. Waters, thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Michelle, thank you so much for that report. And Dr. Dennard, I'm glad that you brought up the Underground Railroad Symposium. Thank you for bringing that up. I was going to mention it if it didn't come up in the conversation here. But Michelle, can you just take a minute and just say a word about what you're doing on the Harriet Jacobs story? I think that's worth sharing.
Absolutely. So you'll see in my report that we, along with several other parts of the department, have received a very competitive planning grant from Z. Smith Reynolds for an initiative called the Harriet Jacobs Project. It's a public art initiative. For those who aren't familiar with Harriet Ann Jacobs, she wrote the book Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl under the pen name Linda Brent. She spent approximately 7 years hiding in a garret over her grandmother's house that was this dimension 7 feet by 9 feet by 3 feet. So she couldn't stand. But then she escapes by boat and returns as a free woman. So there's this constant activity around her story with scholars, historians, geographers. And if you keep up with the art world, you know that the Olympics of the art world is happening right now in Venice, the Venice Biennale. For the first time, an African-American woman is representing the United States. Her name is Simone Lee. She took one of the two top prizes called the Golden Lion for her piece called Brick House. She often references Harriet Jacobs. She was featured at the Guggenheim in 2019 under the phrase loophole of retreat, and will be convening with Black women scholars and artists again in October in Italy, again under the phrase loophole of retreat. Loophole of retreat is one of the ways that Harriet Jacobs refers to the space where she hid. It's the 21st chapter of her book. Many of these artists and scholars have never stepped foot in Edenton. So we are rectifying it. We are rectifying that. We in 2024 was a part of the build up to the 250th anniversary of our country. We'll be featuring the Harriet Jacobs convening or beckoning in Edenton, month to be determined. It will be a convening of artists, focusing primarily on Black women artists of the South and North Carolina, but also diaspora artists and thinkers. There will be public art. There will also be an art exhibit. This is a partnership with the African American Heritage Commission, the North Carolina Museum of Art. We're also bringing in the Arts Council to connect us to some local artists in the area. So it will likely have a huge ripple effect, and we've already received quite a bit of positive feedback. I'm really excited to work with Sarah's team on the 250th as we think about the possibilities for this project, but happy to get the Z. Smith Reynolds support. We also have other major partners who are kind of lining up to be a part of this.
That's great.
Thank you so much. I thought it was worth highlighting that important work that you're doing there. And so I don't forget here, let me welcome Commissioner Groom to the meeting. Good to see you. But Michelle, thank you again. Are there any other comments or questions for Michelle? If not, again, thank you, Michelle. I'm going to turn to Sarah Kuntz, and who's doing remarkable work. Sarah is juggling many things, as is everyone, but I think Sarah will tell us about archives and records and probably about America 250 as well. So thank you, Sarah.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Chairman, members of the commission, colleagues, good to see everybody. It's hard to follow Michelle. That is a great sounding program. We really look forward to that. I'll pick up where Ramona left off about the vacancy rate. It's funny, her amount, I just calculated mine last night and sent Dr. Waters an email. We're at 20% as well. So we're getting really stretched thin. On the flip side of that, after hearing all the great things that are going on across the Office of Archives and History, and I'm in the middle of an interview process, we have 3 special collections archivist positions open because 2 folks retired after 30 years and 1 moved out of state. And that's been a challenge. I can tell you that the new pay scale is challenging our hires, both outside hires and promotion of internal candidates. But in an interview yesterday, when a candidate was asking about pain points in terms of working with state government, I decided to flip that and I said, well, there's always going to be bureaucratic things. But in the Office of Archives and History, there's so much good work going on and so many opportunities to collaborate with great colleagues and a lot of creativity. And I said, you're not going to get that in other states centralized in one place. And then when you add in the whole department, it's really kind of a the sky's the limit on your creativity and your ability to find partners to collaborate with. So I really appreciate that. And I hope they took that to heart and felt like that wasn't too over the top. But I think it's important that if we can't pay as much as we would like, at least we have some really great resources and great people that we're working with. But I would echo that is really becoming a challenge. Just a few highlights from my report. I talked about a lot of our collaborations. We're doing a lot within the division, within the Office of Archives and History and the department with outside partners for programs, and that's really going well. We're being called upon a lot to do a lot of best practices training, and I decided to pull out the oral historian in this report because he really does a lot of collaborative training. He's talking to local governments, local preservation groups about oral history programs. He's done training for the North Carolina Community College Archives Association, UNC Pembroke, things like that, all on top of collecting a lot of oral histories. So he's really doing a lot to further that, I think, and promote the collection of oral histories across the state, not just with us. So that's, I'm really pleased to see that grow and evolve. In addition to all those programs that I mentioned, we've got some fun ones coming up. Our North Carolina Trivia quarterly meetings have been fun. We're planning one in November, so mark your calendars when the date is announced, for all DNCR trivia, because the department is 50 years old. So we're going to be doing a special one just about the agency and our programs. But then we've been asked to do some trivia events for the International Bluegrass Music Association program that's in Raleigh. So that'll be fun. That'll be our first in-person one in a while. Tours have skyrocketed, which is nice, kind of like what Michelle is saying. We're seeing a return to people wanting to come in. So I have everything from the governor's office legal interns to National History Day students to kind of everybody in between, which is all good because it's nice to be able to return to that and see people engaging in our work in person and not just remotely, which they've been doing only in the pandemic. In terms of our collections, I thought I highlighted a few of my favorite collections that have come in the last few months, including the Outer Banks History Center first LGBTQ collection with the Outer Banks Pride Association. So that was a nice donation. And our audiovisual materials archivist ascertained that some negatives that were in a studio collection that was donated really had a different creator. So he tracked down that creator, and it was a African-American photographer who then went on to a career in the military, but he had used that studio for processing film. And there were some really great little gems in there, including, he found a young picture of young Representative Butterfield and his father. So that's kind of neat. So it was a great little collection to pull out and then highlight and learn a little bit more about. Lots of oral histories coming in, as I mentioned, and I think they're doing a very good job in that unit in thinking holistically. They just recently added, for example, 3 interviews about school segregation in Northampton County, and it was 3 siblings, but it kind of spanned a nice continuum. One sibling who only attended segregated schools, one who was involved in early desegregation efforts, and then one who went to schools after the desegregation efforts ended. So it was a nice opportunity to see a variety of experiences from the same family itself. And then still continuing to add a lot of great interviews for our COVID-19 state agency oral history program. We're trying to target agencies that we haven't heard from or positions that we haven't heard from. So adding to that every day as well. We're just getting ready to start over the summer and into the fall our traveling archivist program visits for this year's this round of participants. So I'll be coming out to see Commissioner Condell next week. I was selfish and I said, I want to go along on the Western ones because I wanted to see your museum. So I invited myself along to the traveling archivist visits, but we've got some good ones. We've got some really great collections that are participating this time, including the Winston-Salem African-American Archive, and we've got a community college. We've got a collection in a local library, and so it's a nice variety participating this time. And then I think our other big summer activity is really working with, we've got 3 outstanding HBCU interns from the department's program. We've got one in the America 250th programming area alone, and that's a gentleman named Cabral Jeter. He's a rising senior at NCA&T. We've got Tiana West, who's a central master's student. She's working with the oral history program, and Cassidy Peterson, who's a recent grad from A&T, who's working with our community development committee. So they're doing a great job, and I'm enjoying the opportunity to get to know them and planning places that I can take them across the department. And then next week, we will welcome an intern from the Department of Administration's program called the Lady Cardinal program. And it's Kimberly Gomez Gonzalez. And this is a program that is aimed specifically at high school women. And they kind of like our HBCU intern, they have an agency placement and then they do some cohort projects. So that's kind of fun. So we're looking forward to welcoming her and showing her around the department. I think in terms of our biggest challenge on the horizon, I've been sharing with Dr. Waters, we have some severe facility issues that are continuing in this building. Our building is showing its age, and we had a consultant in last week, and we're seeing some active damage to our photograph collections just because of our inability to maintain proper environmental conditions. So I'm working with Dr. Waters on elevating that, those challenges, but that's just continues on in this old building. And then I highlighted a few things from America 250th. I didn't include that in my written report, but just a few things that are going on. We have undertaken contracts for some ground penetrating radar research at Halifax that will be in anticipation of then some larger archaeology days and work during the actual 250th. But our state archaeologists thought it was important to do some kind of research work before we got there. So that's one thing that'll be going on in the next few months. We have some contracts to start some lesson plan development around America 250th topics. And we are starting on the development of our first 10 waysides for America 250th. There is money in Governor Cooper's budget proposal to support those activities and some more in the next year. I wrote an earmark request for Representative Price's office, specifically around primary source document kits that could be sent out around the state constitutions and constitutional documents. So far, that has made it through several hurdles in the House Appropriations, and I understand it's made it into the full House bill. So I'm continuing to watch that. And fingers crossed, we'll get an earmark. That'll be something new I've never done. written one of those budget requests. And then Michelle mentioned Kimberly Kandros is a name that's very critical to our agency. She's been writing grants for us, including she's working on one, we're revising one for the National Park Service to do some work at Brunswick Town around stabilizing some of their early structures and assets. So we're very optimistic about that as well. We actually got a call from the grant officer asking us if we wanted to expand the application, which that doesn't usually happen. So I felt like that was a good sign that there may be money there coming. So that was a nice problem to have. And then just in recent outreach for America 250th, Dr. Waters and I met with Dr. Van Noort in the UNC system office to talk about possible ways we could connect with the UNC system. We've had a preliminary visit with Visit NC, doing a lot of outreach with folks in Halifax to start thinking about how we can really kick it off in a good direction in Halifax. Ramona has been doing a lot of good work with the Land Conservancy partners and talking about preservation and identifying spaces that might be good ones to think about preserving in the 250th. And then we also had the opportunity to give some feedback to the National Foundation about their direction and where they're going. So that was a nice recent opportunity to give some feedback to them as well. And then we've been at the agency's DNCR Days, which they started this year, which are 3 events that are going to be in different places in the state on a DNCR location. And there's tables from across the agency, and it's a good opportunity for visitors that are on site that day to learn a lot more about what the department does. So we have a dedicated A250 table to start introducing folks, because we're hearing a lot of that when we say the 250th is coming up. Folks say, what? Oh, I wasn't aware. So a lot of awareness raising that needs to go on there too. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the report or anything else about the archives.
Any questions or comments for Sarah?
Just a minor question, Sarah. On these interns for the oral history program, are these volunteer interns or paid interns or what from the HBCUs?
They're paid. Yes, that's a program that the department supports with a stipend for all the students. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Dr. Denard, we'd like to see even more of that happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one thing I would like to see happen in the next maybe budget request is some support for interns for the Office of Archives and History, starting with America 250th, but maybe get that institutionalized, that we have a pipeline of paid internships to support our work and get students interested in our work.
Wonderful.
Dr. Denard, I'll mention here that you'll be probably pleased to know that I think we're making really good progress in deepening our relationship with the state's HBCUs. Just last week, I had the opportunity to be in conversation with three chancellors of our three of our HBCUs, A&T, Winston-Salem State, and North Carolina Central University. And Deputy Secretary Burns was accompanied me, and we had some really good conversations with those chancellors about how we deepen those relationships.
Good, great.
And I would say thank you so much. And the other challenges with the private HBCUs is to get that going, because there's not necessarily a pre-existing relationship on the state level with those. And we're working on it. And I appreciate, Sarah, the work you're doing with those interns. This is exciting this is different than where we were last year or years before. So I appreciate that work.
Yeah, it's very rewarding too.
Johnson, I'll say, I was giving you a chance to get your academic year over, and I'll be coming to see you to talk to you about how we begin to really develop that relationship. So thank you to each one of the division directors. Ken is not with us, but you have his report, and he's right now he's meeting with an exhibit design team as they do planning for the renovation and expansion of the museum here, and with the work that's going on down at the coast at Galax Channel. So he's busy with that work today. So that's why he is not here with us, but he's here with us in spirit. But thanks to each one of the division directors for those brief reports. You can see that there's so much going on in the department, and especially in the Office of Archives and History. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Waters, and I concur. I welcome Ms. Groom. Commissioner Groom, you actually bring us to 100% attendance today, so that's wonderful. Yes. So I wanted to also give it back to Dr. Waters to share with us any thoughts he has on what traditionally is part of our agenda, is just to have the Deputy Secretary to our commission share some thoughts or concerns or issues that he's dealing with or has faced, and it would be appropriate to share with the commission.
Thank you, Mr.
Chair. Sorry, Dr. Johnson. Did I step on your question here? Sorry.
Yes, it's in terms of the reports. Before we move to something different, I really do appreciate the reports of all of our directors that are here with us. I do want to say that in terms of Mr. Ken Howard's report, there are a few exciting things I think that are missing from his report that have happened at the Museum of History, the community conversations that's been headed up by Crystal Regan. And so I look forward to him being able to talk a little bit more about that program, because it's bringing a lot more folks in connection to the museum. And I look forward to him talking about the awesome Juneteenth activities they had this past week. I mean, there have been some amazing things that happened in just that one museum. The other thing I would say is I would like to also hear more about maybe the other populations of North Carolinians that seem to be missing from his report across the museums. And I think in particular, I'm concerned with what's going on with our Native American populations and activities that have happened, especially in our Western museums. And I know that there's some fantastic things going on. I want to hear about them. I want them to be a part of that. And so it doesn't have a picture of the only people doing things in North Carolina in terms of history are white folks. So that's kind of my comment and my perspective right now.
Okay. Yeah. And I have a question, Mr. Chair, before Dr. Waters moves to his report. In our packet, we did receive a report from Angela Thorpe, correct? At least I saw that. And what do we do with this report?
It is there, Dr. Dncr, for you all to peruse and to read. And Angela was unable to join us for this meeting, but she will join us for the next meeting to give the commission a full report of the activities of the commission. She's been very busy with Juneteenth related events across the state. So I'm absolutely amazed at all the work that Angela and her team are able to get done. It's a lot. She was also invited up to Washington to give testimony for the African American Cemetery bill that Congresswoman Adams has put forward, and so we will be welcoming her to the commission meeting in September.
Okay, I was just excited.
Go ahead.
I was just excited when I saw her report, and I had seen an article in the newspaper dealing with a development at Topsail Island. A whole community, the Ocean City, is being brought into focus with the placement of a historical marker there, and the folk there are trying to revive, that part of the of Ocean City, Topsail's history of the Black community. And there was a large article in the Greenville newspaper, the Daily Reflector, which tied in. So I just wanted to say that what Angela Thorpe is doing, that she's helping to uncover and revive, some of the hidden history, as we focus on the historic markers and history on a stick, but this is helping to give more recognition to some communities that have been kind of, covered up by all of these modern developments with regard to front property. And I visit Topsail, North Topsail, quite a bit for fishing purposes, and I knew a little something about the African American community, but not as much as I learned when I read this detailed article and some of the folk who established that community, and that this historic marker will be placed there on July 1st. And that's going to give more visibility to that area. And so this is something good, all of these initiatives, and maybe what Dr. Johnson has said, we will bring some more of these communities along, so that this just won't be just a white enterprise as we talk about North Carolina's history.
Okay. Well, Dr. Dncr, I concur, having been quite familiar with Topsail Island since the mid-'80s. That area was very robust in terms of African-American activity. And of course, as you may recall, the whole nature of Topsail Island was really dominated by fishing piers. And unfortunately, it was the segregated fishing area for African-Americans for many years, I'm sure. But my point there, with hurricane after hurricane decimating the fishing piers, it kind of broke up a lot of the communities that kind of nestled around, frankly, those fishing piers. Yes, deep activity all through Eastern North Carolina to visit. I used to hear people saying they never spent a night in a cottage or a motel. They spent the night on the pier fishing. But my point there, that's an excellent contribution. I will say this is relative to your comment about Director Thorpe. It's certainly not been intended, but it has been somewhat the practice of late to have her appear and speak to us on kind of what I call the off quarters. As you know, we have the reports, which we've had shared with us today, that are done on a semi-annual basis, not a quarterly basis. And we tend to have had, maybe happenstance for Director Thorpe to really appear on kind of the off quarters. So I think Dr. Waters, if you could certainly communicate to her that she was missed, and we do look forward to her report in September.
Certainly will, Mr. Chair. Dr. Dncr, did you have another comment?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you all. And first, let me just thank you all for the commitment and the time that you take to be a part of this commission and the work of reading through the reports, raising your questions and your observations. I know that I deeply appreciate it. The secretary does, and I know that this entire team deeply appreciates your commitment to the work that is, as I said earlier, is very consequential in what we do. So thank you all for the time that you all are giving to do this work. I will be brief, Mr. Chair, and just say that I've had the opportunity, as I promised to do, to get around to see some of you individually. I will continue to do that. I had a wonderful visit out with Commissioner Snowden, and she's sitting in the space where I was able to stay for the night, and it's a beautiful spot to go to, let me say. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to go back out, but had a great opportunity to visit with her and members of her community there. And even on a rainy night, a very rainy night, I think you had more than 50 people who came out for an event. And so it was to talk about history. And so it was great to hear about all of the work that is going on in that community. And trust me, Commissioner Snowden is right in the front of moving that work. So thank you for having me out to visit with you. I had a great conversation and visit with Commissioner Reynolds as well up in Winston-Salem. And this is to get a chance to hear what is on your mind. Dr. Dncr and I have had, I think, at least 2 visits together. He came up here to see me. I went down to Greenville to visit with him. Those have been productive conversations. And I will be reaching out to the rest of you all to do that with you as well. Dr. Bryan and I have had a couple of occasions to get together, but it's been to discuss, major business in Fayetteville, but I'm looking forward to the opportunity to talk about some broader things there with her. But it's wonderful to see the work that is going on in Fayetteville as well. So Dr. Bryan, Commissioner Bryan, it was great to visit with you. I've been out to Cherokee to see Commissioner Condell, and it was a good conversation with you as well. So I look forward to continuing that conversation. And so I will be reaching out to the rest of you soon to come and just have a sit down conversation with you to find out what is on your mind. I think that Commissioner Groom is probably glad to have a break from seeing me all the time, because I would see her all the time while I was there. But, but nevertheless, but thank you all for taking the time to host me as I've been coming to see you all. I will, again, as I said, I look forward to doing that with the rest of you all as we move forward. Michelle and I were talking yesterday. One of the things that I promised to do coming into the job was to get around the state. I have discovered just how large the state of North Carolina is. It is a big state. To travel, to go to historic sites, I've had the opportunity to go and visit all of our museums and museum staff. It's great to see the passion of the people who are doing the work on the ground every day. Michelle and I were discussing yesterday which sites I have not been to, and Michelle is 8. I've been to all but 8, so there's still 8 that I have to get out and visit with the teams there. And again, just let me say, their enthusiasm for the work that they're doing at each of these sites and at the museums is infectious work. I mean, it's very infectious to be in their presence. They're very passionate about what they're doing. And as we talked about earlier, one of my biggest concerns is that we don't take advantage of people's passions for their jobs, but that we're compensating them how they should be compensated for the work that they're doing. And that is a big concern of ours here. And your support as those conversations go forward are very helpful. Again, I want to thank this team. I want to thank Michelle, Sarah, Ken, and Ramona, everybody that is a part of the team that makes up the Office of Archives and History, for the tremendous expertise that they bring to their work. They do it with great spirits. It's amazing. I can't say enough about the spirit that they bring to their roles and to their jobs. They make me look pretty good sitting in this position. So I hope that I can return the favor by actually talking about what they're doing and how they are really supporting the efforts around the state. Ramona, what I'm finding is that there's such an entrepreneurial spirit in this department. So I just wanted to mention that Ramona and I have been in conversations with the folks who lead the Black Family Land Trust, and we're looking forward to deepening the engagement with that group. and bringing them into conversations that we're having here. Just this morning, I had a wonderful conversation along with Ken Howard with Deborah Maxwell, the president of the NAACP in North Carolina, and getting them wonderfully engaged in our conversations here. Dr. Bryan, it was a very good conversation with them this morning. And particularly around some of the things that are going on in Fayetteville. And so it was great to see them want to support this work and want to be engaged in what we're doing. The last time that we met, the secretary was here and he went through the budget, what we got in the last budget. I'm happy to just kind of report here. I talked to him yesterday and I just told him that I would highlight that we're continuing to ask the legislature for support, and they seem to be really open to those conversations. We deeply appreciate what the legislature and the governor did to support this department and the Office of Archives and History in the last go around with the budget. In this expansion budget, we are thankful if you've seen what was included in the governor's budget, nearly $5 million more for the Office of Archives and History and some of the work that we're doing. So we are tremendously thankful that that was included in the budget. We'll see where that goes as they work through that process at the state legislature, and we'll keep you updated on that. As Michelle mentioned, a part of this money in capital projects is $16 million for Charlotte Hawkins Brown. That is an important piece of work that we have to do, and we were so thankful to see that money included in the budget. Just a couple of other things to update you on. As you know, before I came to the department, there was a working relationship with Large Cultural Resources. They were doing a DEAI visitor assessment of some of our sites. They have concluded that first round. We're about to enter into another round with them to continue that work. Part of what was included in the governor's budget was $6 million and asked for $6 million for exhibit updates across historic sites in our museums. We're also going to be undertaking, another campaign to raise private dollars to support that work as well. We're working with Kimberly Kandros to begin that effort. The secretary and I have been working very closely on how we want to kind of map that out. And so we'll be telling you more about that as that process moves forward. Two other updates just to tell you about. One is the rewriting of a history of African Americans in North Carolina. I just want to publicly thank the North Caroliniana Society for the support that they're giving to that work. I want to thank the North Caroliniana Society as well for supporting the National History Day program, which went really well this past year. So that project of rewriting and updating a history of African Americans in North Carolina is moving forward. Dr. Johnson, you'll probably be happy to hear that we are in conversations with St. Augustine University about a history of St. Agnes Hospital. And so that project is beginning to kind of pick up steam. Ramona, working with Ramona's team with Joe Beatty on that. And so we look forward to how that's going to develop as we move forward. So this is a great project, I think, for us to be working on. I also want to thank Sarah for conversations that we've had with constituents around cohabitation records and digitizing those records, which if those records are digitized and made available, it's going to make genealogical research especially for African Americans, it's going to expand the possibilities of what can be done. And I want to thank Sarah and her team for engaging in those conversations and helping to move that project forward. So Commissioner Groom, you'll probably be happy to know we've been in conversation with Deborah Miles and with Drew Reisinger about how we can move that project forward. So as you can see, there's a lot going on. I could continue to talk more, but I'm not going to do that. I continue to enjoy coming into this office every single day. The secretary and I continue to argue about who has the best job. I still think it's me. But again, I want to thank you for the commitment that you all make to supporting us and for asking and raising questions and issues that are really pertinent to the work that we're doing here. And again, thank you for this to this entire team. And just one last thing, Mr. Chair, I want to thank Parker for the work that he does to pull this together for us. He helps to coordinate all of this. He's off screen. He's not one who likes being thanked publicly that much, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I want to thank Phil Fagan, our general counsel, for helping to guide us through some of the conversations that we have to have and helping us to navigate those. And thank him for being here today as well. So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Waters. I think I commend the staff every time we go through these reports. I don't want to repeat that other than to say the word that comes to my mind is outreach, the degree of outreach that you all are collectively involved in. You know, for all of our vocations, there's sometimes a temptation to just get inwardly focused about what's in the weeds that we're all comfortable with and familiar with. But the very fact that you all have done such and do so 24/7, such an outreach to the general population of this state is just really, really, for those of us, I think, on the commission in particular, who aren't in the weeds with you all day to day in the department, is very, very appreciated. And it's very evident through the commentary and the themes of your various reports. So thank you. The next to the last item on the agenda is chair announcements. There are none other than one that I'd like to kind of sow a seed with you all. There are some indications that our September 21st meeting may be a little more complex in terms of issues that we'll need to discuss. And my point there is I would like for you to think, not necessarily determine today, think about a possibility of meeting in person in Raleigh on that particular date. That's Wednesday, September 21st. My hunch would be that unlike the published time of 2 o'clock, if we did consent to a in-person meeting on that date, then that probably would be more appropriate to convene the meeting in the morning, not just begin the meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'm perfectly willing to just, Parker, if you maybe perhaps to do a poll of how receptive the commission members would be. Of course, we have not done that since the advent of the worst part of the COVID pandemic. And, but I do feel like sometimes when we have protracted meetings on Zoom, it can be actually a little more taxing. But again, you can't quite, compensate for the in-person occasionally. And I'm not so sure that we won't continue as a part of habit to have some routineness to remote meetings, because frankly, it does facilitate probably even more attendance. But that is one thing I'd like, as a chair's prerogative, to suggest to commission members to be thinking about, and in the near term have Parker reach out to determine the feasibility or desirability of meeting in Raleigh on September 21st in person.
And Mr. Chairman, some of the open meetings flexibility that you have regarding virtual meetings is by virtue of the state of emergency, which may very well be over by September officially. So
there you go.
There may be a necessity to meet in person.
Well, thank you. And I always appreciate the guardrails you provide us in that area. So that, in addition, said, but again, it comes more from what I said earlier around the issue. Just, I think it would be a good respite away from just Zoom land. So that's who am I interrupting here?
And I said it would be person.
Yes. So again, that we don't need to take a vote on that today. I would just like you to be thinking about it and with some consideration. I think Parker would be the optimal conduit for that feedback from commissioners. Any other comments, thoughts?
Yes, sir. Barbara Snowden again. We had another passing of a very well-known historian, Lindley Butler, the last few months. And I would like to request that Dr. Waters send a letter to his family He was the main historian on the Lord Proprietary period, published a brand new book that came out right as he was passing. But I would like, if it's as a personal and for the commission, to send a letter expressing our sympathy to his family, if that is okay with the other commissioners.
Well, again, Phil, I may need to ask the technical question. It's certainly not intended to in any way diminish the sincerity of what Commissioner Snowden. Should we need a vote on that? Is that a resolution of some form, or is that just an informal request that Dr. Waters send that letter?
If the commission wishes to pass a resolution, that'd be fine. It's a regular meeting, so you can add new business to the agenda. I think staff probably has direction that we could get something drafted and have it ready for you at the next meeting if you think a resolution is necessary at that point.
Well, I do think that perhaps it would be appropriate to send a letter rather than wait for 3 more months for a resolution to be prepared, and then the delay that the pertinence of the letter now, I think, would be important.
Can we do a letter now and a resolution later?
It does not require commission action for Dr. Waters to send a letter on behalf of.
That's fine. I agree with that sentiment, Dr. Johnson. Let's perhaps be thinking, Commissioner Snowden, on if you feel that a resolution would be appropriate, put some thought into that. And we'll consider that in September, but I definitely think that would be appropriate, if you don't mind, Dr. Waters, to communicate the condolences.
I think that would be very appropriate for him to write a letter on our behalf for all the work that Dr. Butler has done.
Thank you, Commissioner Snowden. I'm happy to do that.
And thank you for informing us and making us aware of that, Commissioner Snowden. Are there any other comments, or, as Mr. Fagan said, any other items of business that we need to consider at this point?
I guess I'm chatty today. I just wanted to again say to Ramona on behalf of the Office of State Archaeology that team, as they were working with Freedom Park to excavate, these exciting findings. And please remind me of the name of the young woman who was the lead on that. Her explanation on Spectrum News was it was concise, but it was clear. And it, I think, generated a little excitement in what's going on at Freedom Park, and just the idea of things can still be discovered. And so your team is great.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. I think you're referring to our colleague, Assistant State Archaeologist, Dr. Mary Beth Fitz.
Yes, Mary Beth.
Who is a fine graduate of UNC Chapel Hill. Thank you very much.
Yes, and then the other thing is a little bit of bragging, but it also illustrates the connections that we all have. Lynn Harris at ECU, and I just got published a book called Excavating the Histories of Slave Trade and Pirate Ships. And that little volume is highlighting the work that's been done in North Carolina around underwater archaeology, and is really kind of putting us at the forefront of these newer interpretations of what we're finding on the slave vessels. So I just wanted to kind of brag a little bit that this came out, but it's also part of the work that's been done by the Historical Commission and ECU in terms of maritime archaeology, and then the other persons who contributed to this volume did so from their research and their work. So we got good stuff happening, and I wanted to lift that up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. That was very helpful to add that as well. Always appreciate your perspective on these things. Any other comments or thoughts before we entertain a motion for adjournment? Well, again, thank you very, very much again to the entire staff. Thanks to every one of you commissioners, 100% participation today. And so I will call, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
You
Mr. Chair.
still want to be in session, huh? Okay. Dr. Dncr, I believe I heard Dr. Dncr. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Groom, thank you. So all in favor of adjournment to be reconvened, if not before on September 21st, say aye. Dr. Bryan.
Aye.
Mayor Clark.
Aye.
Ms. Condell. Is Ms. Condell still?
Aye.
Okay. Dr. Dncr.
Aye.
Mr. Dixon.
Aye.
Ms. Groom.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Snowden.
Aye.
David Ruffin, aye. Again, thank you all so much. Enjoy your wonderful summer and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Bye,
Take care.
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.
Aye.